stormy winter, staying here tonight.
Howdy ha, shindiggers. My name is Steve Holroyd. By my side, as always, is Sammy the Wonder Pug, and you are listening to The Front Row. After a long break, it's time to revisit a subject I promised the last time we were together. A look at the dark age of American soccer, the period after the original North American Soccer League's demise after the 1984 season and the arrival of MLS in 1996. That period that would appear to be a desolate wasteland where there was no Division I soccer, and indeed it would appear there was no soccer at all. This topic is more than just history in light of recent events. The past week or so brought news that the new North American Soccer League was struggling and might collapse. And too many folks on the Twitterverse thought that this was the greatest news ever, as if it might lead to a collapse of the current closed setup and usher in a new dawn, a new age of free and open clubs, promoting and relegating themselves to their heart's content. Well, God forbid that there should be no soccer in this country. And perhaps people need to be reminded what life was like without a genuine D1 league in the United States. As we discussed on the last podcast, so many moons ago, there was the beginnings of a grassroots movement to take back the sport from the aged in the sense of the players playing and bloated North American Soccer League, with the arrival of the original United Soccer League in 1984. Now, alas, that only lasted about a season and a half. Nevertheless, the belief that led to its formation, that soccer in the United States needed to be built from the bottom up again, because it's really sort of what happened in 73 and 74 with the North American Soccer League. That belief continued. Now, like so much in recent American soccer history, the genesis of the Take Back Our Game movement can be traced to the Emerald City. In 1983, the original Seattle Sounders were purchased by new owners and featured a general manager who was a former American gridiron football player. And he embarked on a misguided course of Pan-Americanism, not just with players on the field, which was always desirable, but the thought that American fans didn't want to see good passing or skillful play, but they wanted to see rough and tumble soccer. Indeed, the Sounders in '83, their catchphrase, emblazoned in their advertisements and on their media guide, featured the phrase "red, white, black, and blue." Not exactly a harbinger of good soccer. Well, in any event, fans stayed away in droves, and by the end of the season, the club folded. However, although the NASL was gone, Seattle soccer fans were not. In 1984, FC Seattle was born, a locally based, locally owned super club, as they tagged themselves, featuring the best players from around the area. The FC Seattle featured former New York Cosmos defender Jeff Durgan, himself a native of nearby Tacoma, and also featured the greatest American star you've never heard of, forward Brent Goulet, who probably warrants his own podcast one day. Anyway, comprised primarily of Seattle area natives, FC Seattle was the most exciting thing in the NASL that year, even though they did not play in the league. Instead, they played 4 exhibitions against 3 NASL teams, going 1-2-1, with most of the scores close. But the results weren't as impressive as the project itself. American-owned, American-operated, featuring local players. To many, FC Seattle was the future template of the NASL. Unfortunately, the NASL never got to try to implement that template. Although it offered FC Seattle a place in the league, the club could see the NASL was hemorrhaging money and declined. The club's instincts were correct. With 4 teams, including 1984 champion Chicago Sting and the New York Cosmos, jumping to indoor soccer, joining the Major Indoor Soccer League, the NASL was down to just 5 teams, and without a commissioner following the sudden death of Howard Samuels. Former New York Cosmos general manager Clive Toye, the man who brought Pelé to America, stepped in to fill the role left by Samuels' death. Unlike those who saw the defection of the 4 clubs as a death knell for the outdoor league, Toye saw it as an opportunity. Toye saw it as an opportunity to return real pro soccer to the U.S. FIFA rules, no more 35-yard lines, no more 6 points for a win, grass fields, and no more shootouts. Unfortunately, only 2 of the remaining 5 teams were interested in pursuing that vision, and the NASL suspended operations on March 28, 1985. Pro outdoor soccer was not yet dead, however, and that's not counting the, again, original USL, which was limping its way to its demise. No, the grassroots movement started by Seattle began to take hold. In 1985, FC Portland was formed, following the FC Seattle model of being a super club made up of the best players in the Portland area. These 2 teams were eventually joined by a resurrected San Jose Earthquakes. Actually, I guess the better term is independent San Jose Earthquakes. They declined to participate in the North American Soccer League but continued the team going, along with the Victoria Riptides from Canada, to create a challenge series dubbed, appropriately enough, the Western Alliance Challenge Series. The series also found the teams playing games against 2 outside teams, the Edmonton Brickmen and the Canadian national team. This home-and-home series was so successful that the teams decided to form a new league the following season, the Western Soccer Alliance. And from 1986 to 1989, the circuit continued with varying degrees of success, including teams from Los Angeles, expanding beyond the Pacific Northwest. However, growing beyond its brown paper bag origins began to strain league resources. What was originally envisioned as an alliance of semi-pro teams, as it grew more professional, some of the people involved were not prepared to deal with the increased costs and such. Again, pro-rel advocates take note. Still, success inspires success. The East Coast took note of what FC Seattle and its progeny were doing. Orlando Lions FC were formed in 1985, playing an exhibition schedule, along with the resurrected Tampa Bay Rowdies. By 1988, the 3rd American Soccer League was formed, made up of East Coast teams, with none other than your friend and mine, Chuck Blazer, as commissioner. This ASL lasted 2 years before the inevitable happened. It merged with the Western Soccer Alliance to form the American Professional Soccer League in 1990. This was pretty exciting at the time, as the APSL started out with 22 teams, a number of teams that hadn't been seen even in the NASL levels since about 1981. However, that was the league started at its peak and eventually ended in 1996 as the A-League with 7 teams before going on to be part of the United International Soccer League's pyramid prior to the arrival of MLS. The A-League sought D1 status prior to the arrival of MLS, or at the same time. It sought to be the D1 league that was required by FIFA as part of the conditions to award the 1994 World Cup to the United States, but was denied the status by the USSF because of the presence of some Canadian teams in the circuit, or because of a grand anti-pro-rel conspiracy, depending on who you believe. Now, speaking of Canada, the Great White North did not miss out on all the excitement during this grassroots era, if you will. In 1987, the Canadian Soccer League was formed, anchored by the Vancouver 86ers, the direct lineal descendants of the Whitecaps, and Toronto Blizzard, another NASL holdover. Other teams included Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Winnipeg, and with the addition of Nova Scotia in 1991, the CSL became Canada's first and to date only coast-to-coast professional sports league. Unfortunately, that was the high watermark for the league. Nova Scotia only lasted 1 year, and the rest of the league folded after the 1992 season. Vancouver jumped to the APSL along with a Montreal team, keeping D1 Canadian soccer alive for a few years longer. But that wasn't all. These were just the three major grassroots circuits. But they were not the only professional soccer leagues to be found. 1987 saw the arrival of the Lone Star Soccer Alliance, which ran from 1987 to 1992, featuring, as the name would imply, teams mostly from Texas, including Houston Dynamos, who bolted from the USL in 1984 to go independent, and some teams from Oklahoma. Meanwhile, 1986 saw the creation of the Sun Belt Independent Soccer League, which started out as an indoor circuit, but in 1989 added an outdoor schedule. Why do we care about the SISL? Well, in 1991, the league renamed itself the United States Interregional Soccer League, changing to United States International Soccer League in 1995, and going through a bunch of other name changes until finally settling on what we know it as today, the United Soccer Leagues. So, there you have it. And I'm not even touching upon the fact that, while we're talking about outdoor soccer and that dark era between the NASL and MLS, again, indoor, for some of that period, indoor soccer was flourishing at levels it had not seen before or since. So all this history, I suppose it can be taken both ways. There are some who would like to see MLS blown apart so a more organic, open system can develop. And they might point to this history as proof that the sport will survive. You don't need MLS. There will always be soccer. The flip side of that, though, is what I think really should not be forgotten. And that is that the development of these leagues was often utter chaos. And notwithstanding the visions of the CSL, the WSA, the ASL, there was very little major about them. While all of the stars of the 1990 and 1994 U.S. World Cup teams spent times at various times with teams in the WSA, ASL, and APSL clubs, all bolted for greener pastures overseas. There was really no way to make a living playing here. There were no TV contracts. There was little media coverage, although admittedly this is in the pre-internet era. And these leagues are really more akin to what we're seeing today with pro lacrosse, both indoor and out, and arena football, than what we've seen with MLS, which is challenging to be part of the Big Four. Still, it begs the question, would there be an MLS without these leagues? Well, the easy answer is yes. After all, FIFA's award of the 1994 World Cup to the U.S. demanded that a D1 league be in place. But it goes deeper than that. While teams came and went in these leagues, there was always a core group of clubs, teams like Vancouver 86ers, the San Francisco Bay Blackhawks, various Seattle and Portland permutations, who proved that there was a market for soccer if properly developed and presented. More important, these leagues show that locally based Pan-American soccer could succeed. MLS took what worked from these leagues, avoided what did not, and eventually produced the successful league we know today. Well, that's it for this episode. As some of you, those of you who subscribe, no doubt know, there was quite a layoff. By all means, suggest topics. I'm always looking for ideas. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is new. It's at SoccerMaven, Soccer M-A-V-N. You can email us at Yahoo, soccermaven@yahoo.com. And feel free to subscribe on iTunes and leave reviews and ratings. So until next time, this is Steve Holroyd with Sammy the Wonder Pug, wishing you a good night and good soccer.
And now we're happy to see you succeed in everywhere you are. Cause you're keener than Keegan, and you're better than best. We always knew you'd go far. You're a 70s football star.